I knew something was wrong the moment Donna Kimball knocked on my door at 7 in the morning on that frigid January Saturday in Riverside, Ohio. "Warren Henderson, I need to speak with you immediately about a safety hazard you're creating in this neighborhood," she announced before I'd even fully opened the door. Her arms were crossed tightly over her puffy winter coat, and her face had that pinched expression I'd come to recognize during the 6 months since she'd been elected HOA president. The kind of look that said she'd already decided I was guilty of whatever she was about to accuse me of. I rubbed sleep from my eyes and pulled my robe tighter. "Morning to you too, Donna. What's this about? Don't play innocent with me. There's a strong propane smell coming from your property and it's permeating the entire cul-de-sac. Mrs. Patterson 3 doors down called me at 6:30 this morning because she was worried about an explosion. This is a serious matter." I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "Propane smell? Donna, I don't even use propane. My house is all electric except for the natural gas furnace, and that's a completely different thing." She pursed her lips. "I know what propane smells like, Warren. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, long before you moved in last summer. The smell is definitely coming from your direction, and as HOA president, it's my responsibility to ensure the safety and property values of Riverside Estates. I'm going to need you to have someone come out and inspect your systems immediately. It's Saturday morning, Donna. And like I said, I don't have any propane on my property. No grill, no tanks, nothing. Well, something is causing that smell and it's a serious safety issue. According to Section 12.4 of the HOA bylaws, any homeowner creating a hazardous condition must remediate it within 24 hours or face fines of $500 per day. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of what looked like a dense document. "I'm officially notifying you right now. You have until 7 tomorrow morning." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "Donna, I'm telling you, there's no propane here. Maybe the smell is coming from somewhere else." I walked the entire street, Warren. "It's strongest right here at your property line." She gestured dramatically toward my front yard. "I have a very sensitive nose and I can trace smells to their source. It's definitely your house." "Then let's call the fire department and have them check it out properly," I suggested. "They have equipment that can detect gas leaks and identify sources. If there really is a propane smell, we should get professionals involved anyway for safety reasons." Donna's expression shifted slightly. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty, worry. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual imperious demeanor. "Fine. But I'm holding you responsible for whatever they find. And if this turns out to be your negligence, I'll be calling an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss additional penalties beyond the standard fines." She turned on her heel and marched back down my driveway, pulling out her phone as she went. I stood there in my doorway, the cold January air seeping through my robe, and wondered what I'd gotten myself into when I bought a house in an HOA community. Back in Cleveland, I'd rented an apartment for years. When I finally saved up enough for a down payment and started looking for houses, my realtor had assured me that Riverside Estates was a well-managed community with reasonable rules. 6 months in, I was starting to seriously doubt that assessment. I went back inside and made coffee, then got dressed in jeans and a heavy sweater. While the coffee brewed, I walked around my small 2-bedroom ranch house, sniffing carefully. I didn't smell anything unusual. My furnace was only 3 years old according to the inspection I'd had done before closing, and it had passed with flying colors. I had no gas stove, no gas water heater, and definitely no propane anything. By the time I'd finished my first cup of coffee, I heard sirens. I looked out my front window to see a Riverside Fire Department truck pulling into the cul-de-sac, followed by what looked like a battalion chief's SUV. Donna was already outside, waving them down and pointing at my house. I grabbed my coat and headed out to meet them. The morning was bitterly cold, with that sharp edge that promised snow later in the day. My breath formed white clouds as I approached the cluster of firefighters gathering near Donna. "That's him. That's the homeowner," Donna said as I walked up. "Warren Henderson. I've been trying to get him to take this seriously, but he insists he doesn't have any propane on his property." A tall man in his 50s with Chief Morrison on his jacket stepped forward and extended his hand. "Mr. Henderson, I'm Chief Mike Morrison. We got a call about a possible gas leak in the neighborhood. Mind if we take a look around?" "Please do," I said, shaking his hand. "I'd really like to figure out what's going on. I honestly don't smell anything, but if there's a safety issue, I want it resolved." Chief Morrison nodded and turned to his crew. "Jenkins, grab the multi-gas detector. Patterson, you and Rodriguez start doing a perimeter check. Let's figure out what we're dealing with here." One of the firefighters, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, retrieved a yellow handheld device from the truck. She turned it on and it began beeping softly. "Madam, can you show me where the smell is strongest?" Chief Morrison asked Donna. Donna led them toward my property, walking along the sidewalk that bordered my front yard. "It's definitely strongest right around here," she insisted, gesturing broadly. "I could smell it all the way from my house, though. I live 4 doors down." The firefighter with the detector, Jenkins, walked slowly along the path Donna had indicated, watching her device carefully. The beeping stayed consistent, a steady rhythm that apparently indicated no elevated readings. "I'm not getting anything here, Chief," Jenkins called out. "Background levels only." Donna's face flushed. "Well, maybe it's dissipated since I first smelled it. It was very strong earlier before sunrise. Mrs. Patterson can confirm it. She called me because she was genuinely frightened." "Where does Mrs. Patterson live?" Chief Morrison asked. 3 doors down that way." Donna pointed east along the curved street. "Let's walk the whole area," the chief said. "If there was a propane smell earlier, we need to locate the source. Gas leaks don't just disappear. And if someone really did smell something this morning, we need to take it seriously." The crew spread out, walking along the street and between houses, their detectors scanning constantly. I followed along, grateful I'd grabbed my heavy coat. The temperature couldn't have been much above 20 degrees, and the wind was picking up. We must have spent 20 minutes walking around, checking my house, the neighbors' houses, and every inch of the cul-de-sac. The whole time, Donna kept insisting the smell had been there earlier, that it was real, that I must have propane somewhere that I wasn't disclosing. "Mr. Henderson, mind if we check inside your house?" Chief Morrison asked, "just to rule out your furnace or any other gas appliances." "Not at all," I said, leading them back toward my front door. "Like I told Donna, I've got a natural gas furnace and that's it. Everything else is electric. Stove, water heater, dryer, all electric." Chief Morrison and Jenkins followed me inside. The warmth of the house was a welcome relief after the cold morning air. I showed them to the basement, where my furnace sat in a small utility room. Jenkins scanned around the furnace carefully with her detector, while Chief Morrison did a visual inspection. "Natural gas furnace fairly new," he noted. "No signs of damage or improper installation. What's the detector showing, Jenkins?" "All clear, Chief. No elevated readings at all." We went back upstairs, and Jenkins checked around my electric stove, my electric water heater in its small closet, and even my electric dryer in the laundry room. Everything came back clean. Mr. Henderson, I can confidently say you don't have a gas leak in your house, Chief Morrison said as we walked back outside. And based on our scan of your property and the surrounding area, I'm not detecting any propane or natural gas levels above normal background. Donna was waiting on my front lawn, her arms still crossed, her expression skeptical. So what was I smelling this morning? I didn't imagine it, Chief, and Mrs. Patterson smelled it too. I believe you smelled something, madam, Chief Morrison said diplomatically, but I need to expand our search. Gas odors can travel, especially in cold air like this. The source might not be where the smell is strongest. Which house is Mrs. Patterson's? Donna pointed to a white colonial 3 houses down. That one. Let's talk to her, and then I'd like to check a few more properties if the owners are home. We walked down the street together, a strange procession of firefighters, an annoyed HOA president, and a confused homeowner. Mrs. Patterson, a woman in her 70s with white hair and kind eyes, answered her door almost immediately. "Oh, Chief Morrison, thank goodness you're here," she said. "That smell this morning was terrifying. I was worried the whole neighborhood might blow up. Can you describe the smell for me, Mrs. Patterson?" the chief asked. "It was that rotten egg smell, you know, the one they put in gas to help you detect leaks, very strong. It woke me up around 6 and I immediately called Donna because I was so worried." "And where were you when you smelled it? What room?" "I was in my bedroom, which is on the 2nd floor at the front of the house. My window was cracked open just a little bit because I like fresh air when I sleep, even in winter." Chief Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "And you're sure it was coming from outside?" "Oh yes, definitely from outside. When I closed the window, the smell faded quite a bit." "Jenkins, let's check Mrs. Patterson's property," the chief directed. To Mrs. Patterson, he added, "Mind if we take a look around, madam, including inside your house? Please do anything to help figure this out." The crew spent another 15 minutes checking Mrs. Patterson's house and property. Again, nothing. No elevated readings, no signs of gas leaks. By this point, a few other neighbors had emerged from their houses, curious about the fire truck and all the activity. Donna immediately appointed herself spokesperson, explaining to everyone about the dangerous gas smell and the investigation underway. Chief Morrison pulled me aside. "Mr. Henderson, I want to check the other houses on this cul-de-sac, particularly the ones between your house and Mrs. Patterson's. Would you mind helping me knock on doors? Sometimes people are more comfortable if a neighbor is there rather than just firefighters." "Sure, no problem," I said. We walked to the house directly next to mine, where a young couple named the Reeds lived. Tyler Reed answered the door, looking alarmed at the sight of firefighters. "Hey, Warren, what's going on? Is everything okay?" I explained the situation while Chief Morrison and his crew waited politely. Tyler and his wife Emma let us check their property. Again, nothing unusual. The next house belonged to the Martinelli family. Frank Martinelli, a guy about my age who worked in IT, was home with his kids while his wife was at work. Same story, they were happy to help, but the detectors showed nothing abnormal. That left the house directly between the Martinellis and Mrs. Patterson, a beige ranch that I'd never really paid much attention to. I'd seen the owner a few times, an older man who seemed to keep to himself. We knocked on the door, but there was no answer. "Mr. Henderson, do you know who lives here?" Chief Morrison asked. "I've seen an older gentleman, maybe late 60s or early 70s, but I don't know his name. We've never really talked." Donna had followed us and overheard the question. "That's Robert Chen. He's lived here for about 8 years, keeps to himself mostly. He mentioned once that he travels a lot to visit his daughter in California." Chief Morrison tried knocking again, louder this time. Still no answer. He walked around to the side yard and I followed. Jenkins came with us, her detector in hand. As we moved along the side of the house toward the back, Jenkins' detector suddenly began beeping rapidly, much faster than before. She held it up, watching the display. "Chief, I'm getting elevated readings. Propane, definitely propane." Chief Morrison's expression became more serious. "How elevated?" "Not immediately dangerous, but definitely above normal, and it's getting stronger as we move toward the back of the house." We continued around to the backyard, where an old wooden deck extended from a sliding glass door. The detector's beeping became almost frantic. "There's definitely a propane source here," Jenkins confirmed. "Significant concentration." "Check the deck area carefully," Chief Morrison instructed. "Look for any tanks, appliances, anything that might have propane." But the deck was empty except for some old patio furniture covered in snow. "No grill, no tanks, nothing visible. It's got to be coming from inside," Chief Morrison said. He tried the sliding glass door, but it was locked. He peered through the glass, then pulled out his phone. "I'm calling this in. We've got a definite propane reading at an occupied residence with no response from the homeowner. That's enough for us to force entry if needed." Within 10 minutes, a police cruiser had arrived. Officer Garcia, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, took Chief Morrison's report and attempted to contact Robert Chen through various means, including calling the phone number listed on his property records. No response. "We're going in," Officer Garcia decided. "Chief Morrison, your call on how to proceed." "Jenkins, Rodriguez, gear up. We're going to force the sliding door and investigate. Everyone else stay back. Mr. Henderson, Miss Kimball, I need you both to move to the front yard and stay there." I walked back around with Donna and the gathered neighbors, who had multiplied as word spread about the situation. There were probably 15 people now, all watching with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "I told you there was a gas smell," Donna said to no one in particular, though loudly enough that everyone could hear. "I have a very sensitive nose. I could tell something was wrong." I bit my tongue. Yes, there was a propane smell. But it wasn't coming from my house like she'd insisted, and she'd been ready to fine me $500 a day for it. About 10 minutes later, Chief Morrison emerged from the backyard and walked over to where we were gathered. His expression was grave. "We found the source. Mr. Chen has a propane furnace in his basement, fairly old system. The exhaust vent has separated from the furnace, and it's been venting propane and carbon monoxide directly into his basement and up through the house. It's a miracle the place hasn't exploded or that he hasn't died from carbon monoxide poisoning." A collective gasp went through the crowd. "Is he in there? Is he okay?" Mrs. Patterson asked, her hand over her heart. "The house is empty. Looks like he might have been gone for a while. The furnace has been running on a low setting, probably thermostat set to 55 or so to prevent pipes from freezing while he's away. But that disconnected vent has been leaking the whole time. Given the cold snap we've had the last week, the furnace has been cycling more frequently, which is probably why the smell became noticeable." "So the smell was coming from Robert's house the whole time?" Donna asked, and I detected a note of uncertainty in her voice. "Yes, madam. The propane was venting from his basement, and with the way the wind was blowing this morning and the cold air settling, it was moving across the properties. Mr. Henderson's house is downwind, which is probably why you thought it was coming from there." Chief Morrison turned to me. "Your house is completely clear, Mr. Henderson. You don't have any gas issues at all." "Thank you, Chief," I said, feeling a mix of relief and vindication. Donna's face had gone red. "Well, I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." The smell seemed like it was coming from Warren's direction. "You did the right thing calling us." Chief Morrison said diplomatically. Gas smells should always be reported immediately, but I want to stress that Mr. Henderson had nothing to do with this situation. Officer Garcia joined us from the backyard. Chief, we've secured the property and shut off the propane. I've contacted Mr. Chen's daughter in California through information we found inside. He's been staying with her for the past 3 weeks while recovering from hip surgery. She's going to call him now and let him know what happened. She said he's planning to return next week. Good. He's going to need a certified HVAC contractor to repair that furnace before it can be used again, and the house needs to be properly aired out. I'll be filing a report and sending a copy to Mr. Chen with our recommendations. Chief Morrison looked at the gathered crowd. Folks, the situation is under control. The propane source has been identified and shut off. There's no danger to the neighborhood. You can all go back to your homes. The crowd began to disperse, people talking among themselves about the excitement. I heard snippets of conversation, neighbors discussing how scary it could have been, how lucky it was that someone noticed the smell. I started to head back to my house, but Donna caught up with me halfway across the Martinelli's lawn. "Warren, I want to apologize," she said, and she actually sounded somewhat sincere. "I was certain the smell was coming from your property. I shouldn't have been so quick to threaten you with fines." "Apology accepted," I said, even though I was still irritated about being accused and threatened first thing in the morning. "I'm just glad they found the real source before something bad happened." "Yes, well, as HOA president, I take safety very seriously. That's why I perhaps came on a bit strong. But it's my responsibility to protect property values and ensure the neighborhood is well maintained." There it was, property values, of course. "I understand, Donna. But maybe next time we can start with the investigation before jumping to fines." She nodded stiffly. "I'll take that under advisement. Now, I need to document this incident for the HOA records. We'll need to send a formal letter to Mr. Chen about the situation and ensure he gets it repaired before it becomes a recurring issue." She walked away, already pulling out her phone, probably to call the other board members. I went back to my house, grateful to finally get back to my quiet Saturday morning, but of course, it wasn't quiet for long. Around noon, my doorbell rang again. This time it was Frank Martinelli from 2 doors down. "Hey Warren, sorry to bother you. I just wanted to check in after all that craziness this morning. That was pretty intense, huh?" "Yeah, definitely not how I expected to start my weekend," I said with a laugh. "Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. I was on the HOA board last year before I rotated off. Donna's been president for 6 months now, and she's been getting progressively more intense about enforcement. You're not her first target." I raised my eyebrows. "Really?" "Yeah, she hit the reeds with a fine last month because Tyler had his work truck parked in his driveway overnight. Said it violated the commercial vehicle restrictions. The thing is, his truck is just a regular pickup with a small company logo on the door. Nothing commercial about it really, but she was insistent. They had to fight it at a board meeting and eventually got it overturned, but it was a whole thing." "That's ridiculous." "I know. And the Sullivans over on Pine Street got fined because their Halloween decorations stayed up until November 3rd. The bylaws say decorations must come down within 48 hours of the holiday, and she measured it down to the hour." Frank shook his head. "She's using the bylaws like a weapon instead of a guideline. So what do people do about it? Most people just pay the fines or fight them at board meetings. But honestly, I think someone needs to challenge her more formally. She's making enemies all over the neighborhood, and it's getting worse. This thing with you this morning, threatening fines before even getting the fire department involved, that's a new low." I nodded slowly. Well, at least it got resolved. Turned out to be Robert's house after all. Yeah, and thank God for that. Imagine if his furnace had exploded or something. The whole block could have been damaged. Frank shifted his weight. Anyway, I just wanted to check in and let you know you're not alone in dealing with Donna's stuff. If you need support or advice on dealing with the HOA, let me know. There's actually a group of us who have been talking about maybe trying to vote her out at the annual meeting in March. Appreciate that, Frank. I'll keep it in mind. After Frank left, I spent the rest of Saturday trying to relax, but the morning's events kept running through my mind. I'd moved to Riverside Estates because I wanted a nice, quiet neighborhood. The houses were well maintained, the streets were clean, and it seemed like a good community. But if the HOA was going to be a constant source of stress, maybe I'd made a mistake. Sunday passed quietly, and I was grateful for the uneventful day. I did some meal prep for the week ahead, watched some football, and generally tried to forget about propane smells and HOA threats. Monday morning, I was getting ready for work when my phone rang. Unknown number but local area code, so I answered. "Is this Warren Henderson?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Robert Chen. I live a few houses down from you on Riverside Estates. The fire department called my daughter about an issue at my house." "Oh, Mr. Chen, yes. Are you okay? I heard you're in California." "Yes, I'm out here recovering from hip replacement surgery. I'm told there was a propane leak from my furnace and that it was affecting the neighborhood." That's what the fire chief said. "They found a disconnected vent in your basement, but they shut off your propane, so everything's safe now." "I'm so embarrassed," Mr. Chen said, and he genuinely sounded distressed. "I had no idea. The furnace was serviced last year before winter, but I guess something must have come loose. And here I've been gone for 3 weeks while it was leaking. What if someone had been hurt?" "Everyone's fine, Mr. Chen. The important thing is they found it and fixed it. My daughter is flying out there tomorrow to meet with a furnace repair company. She's going to oversee the repairs and make sure everything's safe before I come home. But I wanted to call you personally, because I understand the HOA president accused you of being the source of the smell. I feel terrible about that. It's not your fault at all. These things happen. Still, I'd like to make it right. Once I'm back home and everything's repaired, I'd like to have you over for dinner. My way of apologizing for the trouble my house caused you." "That's really not necessary, but I appreciate the offer." "Please, I insist. I'll call you once I'm back in town." We said our goodbyes, and I headed off to work at the manufacturing plant where I worked as a quality control supervisor. It was a good job, steady pay, and the Monday morning routine of checking production reports and meeting with my team helped get my mind off the weekend's drama. But apparently, the drama wasn't over. When I got home Monday evening, there was a letter in my mailbox on official Riverside Estates HOA letterhead. I opened it while standing at my mailbox, curious and slightly concerned about what fresh nonsense this might be. The letter was from Donna, in her capacity as HOA president. It was a formal incident report documenting the propane smell, the fire department's investigation, and the discovery that the source was Mr. Chen's furnace. So far, so good. But then, I got to the last paragraph. While the investigation determined that Mr. Chen's property was the source of the propane leak, the incident raised serious questions about property maintenance and safety protocols within our community. As HOA president, I am recommending to the board that we implement mandatory annual HVAC inspections for all properties, with certified inspection reports to be submitted to the HOA by October 1st of each year. Failure to submit proof of inspection will result in fines of $250. This measure will help ensure the safety of all residents and protect our property values. I read it twice, not quite believing what I was seeing. She was using this incident as justification for creating a whole new requirement and fine structure. I pulled out my phone and called Frank Martinelli. "Frank, did you get a letter from the HOA today?" "Yeah, just read it. Mandatory HVAC inspections. Is she serious?" "Apparently. Can she even do this? Just unilaterally create a new requirement?" "Not without a board vote, but she's got 2 allies on the 5-person board, so she might be able to push it through. The other 2 board members are usually pretty reasonable, though. This might be where she's finally overstepped. Is there anything we can do?" "Well, the board meets this Thursday night. It's open to all homeowners. You should come and speak during the public comment period. The more people who show up to object, the better chance we have of shooting this down." Thursday night found me walking into the community center at the entrance of Riverside Estates. The room was set up with a long table at the front where 5 chairs sat behind nameplates, and rows of folding chairs facing them. Usually, board meetings attracted maybe 5 to 10 homeowners. Tonight, there were at least 40 people there. Word had spread fast about Donna's proposed mandatory inspection requirement. The seats were filling up quickly, and people were talking in clusters, clearly agitated. Donna sat at the center of the table, flanked by her 2 allies, Brenda Walsh and Tom Martinez. The other 2 board members, Patricia Yu and Gary Stevens, sat at the ends, looking uncomfortable with the crowd. At exactly 7 p.m., Donna called the meeting to order. She read through the standard opening procedures, then moved to the agenda. "Our main item of business tonight is a proposal I've submitted regarding mandatory HVAC inspections. As you all know, we had a serious safety incident last weekend when a faulty furnace at one of our properties created a propane leak that affected multiple homes. This incident could have resulted in an explosion, property damage, or even loss of life. As leaders of this community, it's our responsibility to prevent such incidents in the future." A hand shot up from the audience. "Tyler Raid, my next-door neighbor. We haven't gotten to public comment yet, but I have a question about the incident. Wasn't Mr. Chen's furnace inspected last year?" Donna looked flustered. "I don't have that information." "I do," Tyler said. "I talked to Robert Chen's daughter yesterday. Their furnace was inspected and serviced in October 2024, just 3 months ago. The company that did the inspection said the vent must have come loose sometime after that, possibly from settling or vibration. So a mandatory annual inspection wouldn't have prevented this incident at all." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Donna's face reddened. "That may be, but annual inspections would still help catch potential issues before they become dangerous." "At whose expense?" someone called out from the back. "HVAC inspections cost money." "The cost of an inspection is minimal compared to the potential cost of property damage or loss of life," Donna retorted. Patricia Yu spoke up from the end of the table. "Donna, I appreciate your concern for safety, but I have some questions about this proposal. First, do we even have the authority under our current bylaws to mandate such inspections? And second, what happens if someone refuses or can't afford the inspection?" "Our bylaws give the board broad authority to implement rules for the safety and welfare of the community," Donna said. "As for enforcement, that's what the fine structure is for. People will comply to avoid the fines." Gary Stevens leaned forward. "I've reviewed our bylaws, and I'm not convinced we have the authority to mandate interior home inspections. Our jurisdiction is primarily over external property maintenance and common areas. Requiring access to people's homes for HVAC inspections feels like overreach to me. It's not overreach, it's responsible governance, Donna snapped. The meeting devolved from there. Person after person stood up during the public comment period to object to the proposal. Some cited the cost burden. Others questioned the authority of the HOA to require interior inspections. Still others pointed out that the incident with Mr. Chen's furnace was truly a freak occurrence and didn't justify sweeping new requirements. I stood up when it was my turn. I'm Warren Henderson, and I was directly involved in last weekend's incident since I was initially accused of being the source of the smell. I want to say a few things. First, Mr. Chen's furnace was recently inspected and serviced. This wasn't a case of neglect. Second, the fire department responded quickly and professionally, and they have their own protocols for handling gas leaks. We don't need to duplicate their role. And third, this feels less like a safety measure and more like a reaction to a specific incident that's being used to justify expanding HOA control. I respectfully urge the board to vote no on this proposal. When I sat down, several people around me nodded approvingly. One older man behind me patted my shoulder. After nearly 2 hours of debate, Donna finally called for a vote on her proposal. Patricia Yu and Gary Stevens voted no. Brenda Walsh and Tom Martinez voted yes. That left Donna with the tie-breaking vote. I vote yes, she said firmly. The proposal passes 3-2. The room erupted. People were shouting, some demanding a revote, others threatening to bring legal action. It was chaos. Gary Stevens raised his hands, trying to calm everyone down. Please, everyone, please, let me say something. When the room had quieted somewhat, he continued. I want to be clear about something. While the proposal passed tonight, it still needs to go through a formal implementation process. That means drafting specific language, determining enforcement procedures, and providing proper notice to all homeowners. None of this takes effect immediately, and homeowners still have the option of challenging any new rules through the proper channels. What proper channels? Someone called out. You can petition for a special meeting to overturn a board decision if you gather signatures from 20% of homeowners. Or you can wait until the annual meeting in March and vote for new board members who will rescind this rule. As the meeting broke up, clusters of angry homeowners gathered in the parking lot. Frank Martinelli caught up with me as I was walking to my car. Well, that was a disaster, he said. Understatement of the year. Can she really force this through? Unfortunately, yeah, unless we can stop her. Gary mentioned the 20% petition. There are 200 homes in Riverside Estates, so we'd need 40 signatures. That's doable, but it takes time. The faster option might be to focus on the March election. If we can flip one of her allies or elect new board members, we could have a majority that would overturn this. How does the election work? Any homeowner can run for a board position. We have 5 positions, and they're elected every other year on a rotating basis. This year, 3 positions are up: Donna's, Brenda's, and Gary's. Gary's great and will probably run for re-election. But if we can run candidates against Donna and Brenda, and if we win both seats, we'd have a majority that could undo this nonsense. Would you run? I asked. Frank shook his head. I did my time on the board. It's a thankless job, especially when you have someone like Donna making everything difficult. But I'd support someone else who wanted to run. Maybe you, me. I've only lived here 6 months, so. You're a homeowner. You're clearly passionate about this, and you made a good impression tonight with your comments. People would vote for you. I thought about it as I drove home. The idea of running for the HOA board had never occurred to me. I'd always thought of HOAs as something to tolerate, not something to actively participate in. But maybe that was part of the problem. When reasonable people stayed away, the Donnas of the world took over. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The mandatory inspection rule bothered me on a fundamental level. It wasn't just about the money or the inconvenience. It was about the principle. An HOA should maintain common areas and enforce basic standards. But inspecting the inside of people's homes, that was too far. On Saturday, exactly 1 week after the propane incident, Robert Chen came home from California. His daughter had overseen the furnace repairs, and the house had been properly ventilated. I saw him outside that afternoon, moving slowly with a walker as he retrieved his mail. I walked over to say hello. "Mr. Chen, welcome home. How are you feeling?" He smiled warmly. "Warren, hello. I'm doing much better, thank you. The hip is healing well, and please call me Robert. I'm glad you're doing better. Is your furnace all fixed?" "Yes, thank goodness." The repair company found that the exhaust vent had corroded at the joint. They replaced the entire venting system and did a complete safety inspection. It should be good for many years now. His expression grew more serious. "I heard about the HOA meeting on Thursday. About Donna's new inspection requirement. News travels fast. My daughter told me about it. She's been monitoring the neighborhood Facebook page. A lot of people are upset, with good reason. It's government overreach, except it's even worse because it's HOA overreach." Robert nodded slowly. "I feel somewhat responsible. If my furnace hadn't malfunctioned, Donna wouldn't have this excuse to push her agenda." "Robert, this isn't your fault. Your furnace was maintained properly. These things happen. And honestly, I think Donna has been looking for excuses to expand her authority for a while now. If it wasn't this, it would have been something else. Perhaps." He paused, leaning on his walker. "Warren, I've lived in this neighborhood for 8 years. I was on the HOA board for 2 of those years before Donna was elected. She's changed the whole dynamic of how the board operates. It used to be collaborative and reasonable. Now it's adversarial. I've been thinking about getting involved again. Running for the board, not exactly. I'm too old and too recently injured to take on that responsibility. But I know how HOAs work, and I know how to challenge improper actions. I'd be willing to help organize resistance to this inspection rule and to Donna's leadership in general." Over the next hour, standing in the cold on Robert's driveway, and then eventually moving into his living room, we talked through options. Robert explained that while the board had voted for the mandatory inspections, actually implementing them required following specific procedures under Ohio HOA law. The board had to provide written notice to all homeowners at least 30 days before a new rule took effect. They had to hold a hearing where homeowners could object, and if the rule significantly expanded the HOA's authority, it might even require a vote of the full membership, not just the board. "Donna knows all this, of course," Robert said. "She's smart and she's thorough. But she also tends to be impatient. She'll want to implement this quickly to show her authority. That impatience might lead to procedural errors we can exploit." "What kind of errors?" "Improper notice, inadequate hearing procedures, exceeding the board's authority under the bylaws. Any of those could be grounds to challenge the rule. And if we can show a pattern of behavior where she's overstepping or violating procedures, that's even better." I thought about the incident with the Reeds and their work truck, and what Frank had told me about Donna's enforcement getting more aggressive. I think there might be a pattern already. By the time I left Robert's house, we had the beginnings of a plan. He was going to research the specific legal requirements for implementing new HOA rules in Ohio. I was going to talk to other homeowners who'd had run-ins with Donna and document what had happened. And we were going to look for anyone willing to run for the board in March who could challenge her leadership. The following Tuesday, I got home from work to find another letter from the HOA. This one announced a special assessment of $50 per household to fund enhanced neighborhood safety measures. It didn't specify what those measures were, but the timing was suspicious. The letter said the assessment was due by February 1st. I called Robert immediately. "Did you get the special assessment letter?" "Yes, I'm looking at it now. This is interesting. Interesting. It's $50 we have to pay for something that's not even defined." "Yes, but look at the notice. It says the assessment was approved by the board at an emergency meeting on Monday." "But I've checked the bylaws, and emergency meetings are only supposed to be called for urgent matters that can't wait until the next regular meeting. A special assessment doesn't qualify as an emergency." So the meeting was improper. Potentially, yes. And special assessments over a certain threshold require homeowner approval, not just board approval. I'll need to check what that threshold is, but this is starting to look like another procedural error. Over the next few days, Robert and I dug deeper. He obtained copies of the HOA's governing documents and Ohio state laws regarding HOA operations. I talked to more neighbors and found at least a dozen families who had issues with Donna's presidency. The complaints ranged from arbitrary fines to inconsistent enforcement to accusations of favoritism toward her friends. One couple, the Johnsons, had a particularly egregious story. They'd planted a tree in their front yard last fall, and Donna had fined them for not getting landscaping approval from the HOA. But when they checked the bylaws, there was no requirement for landscaping approval for a single tree. When they challenged the fine, Donna claimed she was interpreting the property modification clause to include landscaping. The board had eventually sided with her, and the Johnsons had paid a $200 fine rather than fight it further. By mid-February, we had documented over 20 incidents of questionable enforcement actions or procedural irregularities during Donna's tenure. Robert organized it all into a comprehensive report. "This is enough to request an audit of the board's actions," Robert said. Under the Ohio Revised Nonprofit Corporation Act, which governs most HOAs, members have the right to request an investigation into alleged misconduct by directors. How do we do that? We need a petition signed by at least 10% of homeowners. That would be 20 signatures. I think we can get that easily. We could. Within 1 week, we had 35 signatures from homeowners requesting a formal audit of the HOA board's actions during Donna's presidency. We submitted the petition at the February board meeting, which was held on a Thursday evening at the community center. The meeting room was packed again, even more crowded than the previous month. Donna looked surprised and uncomfortable when she saw the turnout. Gary Stevens read the petition aloud during the meeting. When he finished, Donna's face was bright red. "This is a witch hunt," she said. "I've done nothing but try to protect this community and maintain our standards. If people don't like that I actually enforce our rules, that's their problem." "Donna, this is a serious petition signed by over 30 homeowners," Patricia Yu said. "We can't just dismiss it." "We absolutely can. This is clearly a coordinated attack by a small group of malcontents who don't want to follow the rules." "Actually, we can't dismiss it," Gary interjected. Under state law, when 10% or more of members petition for an investigation, the board must either conduct one or bring it to a vote of the full membership. We don't have a choice. The argument went on for over an hour. Finally, the board voted 3-2 to conduct a limited audit of board actions over the past 6 months. Patricia and Gary voted yes, along with Tom Martinez, who surprised everyone by breaking with Donna on this issue. Donna and Brenda voted no. I want it on the record that I believe this is a waste of time and resources, Donna said bitterly. But fine. If the board insists on indulging this circus, so be it. The audit was scheduled to be completed by an independent HOA management consultant within 30 days, with results to be presented at the March annual meeting. The consultant, a woman named Margaret Rivers who had over 20 years of experience in HOA management, spent 2 weeks reviewing documents, interviewing board members, and talking to homeowners. She even called me to ask about the propane incident and the subsequent mandatory inspection rule. "That was an interesting situation," she said after I described what happened. "From what I understand, the inspection rule was implemented without proper legal review. Your HOA should have consulted an attorney to ensure it had the authority to mandate interior home inspections. That's a gray area in Ohio HOA law. Gray area meaning we might be able to challenge it. Gray area meaning it probably won't hold up if challenged. Most HOAs don't have the authority to demand access to the interior of homes, except in emergency situations, or when there's visible evidence of bylaws violations. Your board can't just create blanket inspection requirements." The March annual meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon to allow maximum attendance. When I arrived at the community center at 1 p.m., the parking lot was already full. I had to park on the street and walk back. Inside, every seat was taken and people were standing along the walls. I spotted Robert near the front and made my way over to stand next to him. "Biggest turnout for an annual meeting in the neighborhood's history," he said quietly. "People are paying attention now." Donna called the meeting to order. She looked tired and stressed, not her usual imperious self. She went through the standard procedural items, then announced that Margaret Rivers would be presenting the audit results. Margaret stood at the podium with a thick report in her hands. "Thank you for having me here today. I've completed a comprehensive review of the Riverside Estates HOA Board's actions over the past 6 months. My report is available in full for anyone who wants to read it, but I'll summarize the key findings." She went through a list of issues, each one more damning than the last. The mandatory HVAC inspection rule had been implemented without proper legal authority. The special assessment in January had been improperly approved at an emergency meeting that didn't meet the criteria for emergency action. Multiple fines had been assessed for violations that weren't clearly defined in the bylaws, and the board had failed to follow proper notice procedures for several meetings and rule changes. "In my professional opinion," Margaret concluded, "this board has exceeded its authority in multiple instances and has failed to follow proper procedures required under Ohio law and the HOA's own governing documents. My recommendations include rescinding several recent rules and assessments, providing additional training for board members on proper procedures, and implementing better oversight mechanisms to prevent future overreach." The room was silent for a moment after she finished. Then someone started clapping, and within seconds the entire room had erupted in applause. Donna's face was ashen. "This report is biased and unprofessional," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's based on complaints from people who have an agenda. Miss Kimball, my report is based on documented evidence and applicable law," Margaret replied calmly. "You're welcome to challenge any specific finding with counter-evidence." Gary Stevens spoke up. "I move that we immediately rescind the mandatory HVAC inspection rule and the January special assessment based on the findings of this audit." "I second the motion," Patricia said. The vote was 4-1, with only Donna voting no. The 2 controversial measures were officially dead. Then came the election for board positions. As Frank had predicted, 3 seats were up for election: Donna's, Brenda's, and Gary's. Gary was running for re-election unopposed, but Donna and Brenda both had challengers. Running against Donna was Rachel Morrison, a retired teacher who'd lived in the neighborhood for 12 years. Running against Brenda was Kyle Patterson, a younger guy who worked in city planning and had strong opinions about proper governance. The election was by secret ballot, with results counted by 3 volunteers who weren't running for any position. When the results were announced, the room erupted again. Gary Stevens was re-elected with 187 votes out of 192 cast. Rachel Morrison defeated Donna 141 to 51. Kyle Patterson defeated Brenda 128 to 64. Donna stood up, grabbed her things, and walked out of the meeting without a word. Brenda followed her out a moment later. With the new board composition, the first order of business at the next meeting was to revisit all of the rules and enforcement actions from Donna's tenure. Over the following 2 months, the board systematically reversed or modified most of what she'd implemented. Fines that had been improperly assessed were refunded. Requirements that exceeded the board's authority were eliminated. The HOA's operations returned to a more reasonable, collaborative approach. I ran into Donna one more time, about a month after the election. I was at the grocery store in Riverside and I saw her in the cereal aisle. She saw me too, and for a moment I thought she might turn around and leave, but instead she walked over. "Warren," she said stiffly. "Donna, how are you?" "Fine. I'm moving, actually. I've accepted a position in Columbus and I'll be relocating there next month." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." I wasn't entirely sure if I meant it, but it seemed like the polite thing to say. "No, you're not. No one in that neighborhood will be sorry to see me go." She paused and her expression softened slightly. "I want you to know that I really was trying to help. I believed that enforcing standards would protect everyone's property values. I thought I was doing the right thing." "I believe you thought that," I said carefully. "But there's a difference between enforcing reasonable standards and overreaching. The HOA isn't supposed to control every aspect of people's lives." She nodded slowly. "Maybe. Or maybe I was just in a neighborhood that didn't appreciate someone trying to maintain excellence." She turned and walked away before I could respond. A week later, Robert invited me over for the dinner he'd promised back in January. He'd made a wonderful Chinese meal with homemade dumplings, and we spent the evening talking about everything except HOAs. As I was leaving, Robert said, "You know, you did a good thing, getting involved and fighting back. A lot of people would have just paid the fines and grumbled quietly. I had help. You did most of the heavy lifting with the research and the audit petition. We worked together." That's how neighborhoods should work. Not with one person dictating to everyone else, but with people collaborating to solve problems. He smiled. "Have you thought any more about running for the board yourself? We'll have 2 more seats up for election next year." "I don't know. Maybe. Ask me again in a year when I've forgotten how exhausting all this was." Robert laughed. "Fair enough." As I walked home that evening, the spring air warm and pleasant after the brutal winter we'd had, I reflected on everything that had happened since that cold January morning when Donna knocked on my door. The propane smell that led to accusations, investigations, and ultimately exposed deeper problems with how our HOA was being run. The fire chief, who confirmed the truth and inadvertently set in motion a chain of events that changed our neighborhood's governance. My house looked peaceful in the evening light, my little ranch with its well-maintained lawn and electric everything. No propane in sight. I smiled to myself as I walked up the driveway. Inside, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down on my couch. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank. Board just sent out the email. All fines from Donna's tenure are officially reviewed and refunded where inappropriate. Just got $150 back from that truck incident. Thanks for leading the charge on this. I texted back. Team effort and worth it. Another text came in, this time from Rachel Morrison, the new HOA president. First board meeting as president tomorrow night. Want to come observe? We'll be discussing updating the bylaws to include better oversight mechanisms. Your input would be valuable. I thought about it for a moment, then replied, I'll be there. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe getting involved wasn't such a bad thing after all. Not to control people or enforce arbitrary rules, but to make sure the HOA served the community instead of ruling over it. I settled back into my couch, taking a sip of wine, and finally felt like I'd truly come home. Not just to a house in a neighborhood, but to a community where I had a voice and where reasonable people could work together to solve problems. The propane incident seemed like a lifetime ago, even though it had only been a few months. But it had been the catalyst for everything that followed. Sometimes it takes a crisis, even a small one, to reveal larger problems. And sometimes it takes ordinary people deciding they've had enough to create real change. I thought about Donna in her new life in Columbus. I hoped she'd learned something from the experience, but I suspected she'd probably just blame everyone else for not appreciating her efforts. Some people never change, but neighborhoods can change. Riverside Estates was proof of that. We'd gone from a community ruled by fear of fines and arbitrary enforcement to one focused on collaboration and reasonable governance. It wasn't perfect. There would always be disagreements and issues to work through. But it was better. The next evening, I attended the board meeting as Rachel had invited. About 15 other homeowners were there too, a healthy level of community engagement. Rachel ran the meeting efficiently and inclusively, asking for input and actually listening to responses. It was a stark contrast to Donna's authoritarian approach. When discussion turned to updating the bylaws, I raised my hand. I think we should add a provision requiring the board to consult with an attorney before implementing any new rule that significantly expands the HOA's authority. It would prevent future overreach and protect both the board and the homeowners. That's an excellent suggestion, Patricia, you said. It would have prevented several of the issues we dealt with this year. The board voted unanimously to include that provision in the bylaws update. As the meeting continued, other good ideas emerged. A requirement for quarterly financial reports to be shared with all homeowners. A clearer appeals process for anyone who disagreed with a fine or enforcement action. Term limits for board officers to prevent any one person from accumulating too much power. By the time I left the meeting at 9 p.m., I felt genuinely optimistic about the neighborhood's future. Change was possible when people worked together. Over the following weeks and months, life in Riverside Estates settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new board operated transparently and fairly. Enforcement actions were reasonable and consistently applied. The neighborhood Facebook page, which had been full of complaints during Donna's tenure, became a place where people shared recommendations for contractors, organized block parties, and posted about lost pets. In May, Robert organized a neighborhood barbecue at the community center. Over 100 people showed up, including families I'd never met before. The Reeds were there with their 2 kids. The Martinellis brought their famous potato salad. Mrs. Patterson made her special chocolate cake. Even Kyle Patterson, the new board member, manned the grill and flipped burgers for anyone who wanted one. I stood off to the side for a moment, watching everyone mingle and laugh. Frank came up beside me with a beer in each hand, offering me one. Not bad for a neighborhood that was on the verge of civil war just a few months ago, he said. Not bad at all, I agreed, accepting the beer. You know, Rachel told me she's hoping you'll run for the board next year. She thinks you'd be good at it. I took a long drink of my beer, considering. Maybe. But honestly, I'm just happy things are working well now. Sometimes the best governance is the kind you barely notice because everything's running smoothly. True. But it only runs smoothly when good people are willing to step up when needed. You did that. Give yourself some credit. I nodded, acknowledging the point. Fair enough. As the evening wore on and the sun began to set, someone started a fire in the community center's fire pit. People gathered around it, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. Kids ran around playing tag while their parents relaxed and chatted. I found myself sitting next to Robert, both of us warming our hands by the fire. You did well, Warren, Robert said quietly. You could have just paid whatever fines Donna threw at you and kept your head down, but you stood up. That matters. I had good people helping me, you especially. That's how it should work. Community isn't about one person. It's about all of us looking out for each other. He paused, staring into the fire. That's what Donna never understood. She thought being HOA president meant being in charge, having authority over people. But real leadership in a neighborhood means serving people, facilitating cooperation, solving problems together. Think she figured that out in Columbus? Robert chuckled. Probably not, but that's not our problem anymore. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance. Around us, the sounds of conversation and laughter filled the air. This was what a neighborhood should feel like. Safe, welcoming, collaborative. The propane smell that had started it all seemed like ancient history now. But I knew I'd never forget that cold January morning when Donna knocked on my door, certain that I was creating a safety hazard, ready to find me before even investigating properly. It had been the beginning of a journey I never expected to take. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. The confrontation with Donna, the fire department investigation, the discovery of Robert's faulty furnace, all of it had been stressful at the time. But it had also exposed deeper problems with how our HOA operated and created an opportunity to fix those problems. As I drove home that night after the barbecue, passing through the quiet streets of Riverside Estates with their well-maintained homes and neat lawns, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced since moving here. This was my neighborhood now. Not just a place where I owned property, but a community where I was connected to the people around me. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car for a moment, looking at my house. My little electric everything ranch that had been falsely accused of a propane smell. I smiled at the memory, now that enough time had passed to find humor in it. Inside, I settled in for the evening with a book and a cup of tea. My phone buzzed once with a text from Rachel. Thanks for coming to the meeting and for all your input. You're making a real difference here. I texted back, happy to help. That's what neighbors do. And that was the truth. At the end of the day, after all the drama with Donna and the HOA overreach and the fight to restore reasonable governance, the most important lesson was simple. Neighbors help each other. They stand up for what's right. They work together to solve problems. They build community instead of tearing it down. That was worth more than any perfectly maintained property value or strictly enforced bylaw. That was what made a neighborhood truly valuable. I settled into my comfortable couch, content with where I was and how things had turned out. The propane smell was long gone, literally and figuratively. But the positive changes it had sparked would last for years to come. And if Rachel did convince me to run for the board next year, well, I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. For now, I was happy just being a good neighbor in a good neighborhood. The next morning was Sunday, and I slept in late, enjoying the luxury of a weekend with no HOA drama. When I finally got up around 9, I made coffee and wandered out to get the newspaper from my driveway. The morning was beautiful, warm and sunny with a light breeze. Spring in Ohio could be unpredictable, but today was perfect. Several neighbors were out working in their yards. Tyler Reed waved from his driveway where he was washing his truck, the very truck that had caused so much unnecessary drama during Donna's reign. "Morning, Warren," he called out. "Beautiful day." "Sure is," I called back, Mrs. Patterson was planting flowers in her front bed, moving slowly but steadily. The Martinelli kids were riding bikes up and down the cul-de-sac. Robert was sitting on his front porch with a book, his healing hip apparently doing well enough for him to navigate the stairs. This was what Sunday morning in a neighborhood should look like. People living their lives, maintaining their properties, enjoying the weather. No one hovering with a citation book, measuring grass height or checking for bylaw violations. I went back inside and spent the morning doing household chores, laundry and vacuuming, and the usual weekend maintenance. After lunch, I decided to tackle a project I'd been putting off, cleaning out my garage. I was knee-deep in organizing tools when Frank appeared at the garage door. "Need any help?" "Sure, if you're offering. I'm trying to figure out a better storage system in here." We spent the next hour moving things around and installing some shelving I'd bought but never assembled. As we worked, Frank filled me in on neighborhood gossip. Nothing dramatic, just the usual updates about who was doing what renovations, which houses might be going up for sale, that sort of thing. "Oh, and you'll never guess who I ran into at Home Depot yesterday," Frank said as he handed me a screwdriver. "Brenda Walsh. Donna's former ally on the board." "How was that?" "Awkward at first. But she actually apologized. Said she'd gotten caught up in Donna's vision of strict enforcement and realized too late that they'd gone too far. She's not moving or anything, still lives in the neighborhood. But she said she's planning to stay out of HOA politics from now on. Good for her, I guess. At least she recognized the problem." "More than Donna ever did," Frank agreed. By late afternoon, my garage was organized and functional. Frank headed home and I cleaned up and showered. I was thinking about what to make for dinner when my phone rang. Rachel Morrison. "Warren, sorry to bother you on a Sunday. Quick question. The board is discussing possibly creating a neighborhood watch program. Just informal stuff like neighbors keeping an eye out for each other and reporting suspicious activity. Some people think it's a good idea. Others worry it might lead to the kind of over-policing behavior we just got rid of with Donna. You have any thoughts?" I considered it. "I think a neighborhood watch could be great if it's done right. The key would be keeping it voluntary and making sure it's actually about safety, not about watching for HOA violations." "Exactly what I was thinking. Would you be willing to help organize it? You've got credibility with people across the neighborhood." "Let me think about it. Can I get back to you later this week?" "Of course." "Thanks, Warren." After we hung up, I thought about the request. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be heavily involved in neighborhood governance, I'd have laughed. I'd never been a joiner, never been particularly interested in community organizing. But circumstances had changed me, or maybe just revealed a side of myself I hadn't known was there. The truth was, I did care about this neighborhood now. I cared about making sure it stayed a good place to live, that the HOA served people instead of controlling them, that neighbors looked out for each other. If helping organize a neighborhood watch contributed to that, maybe it was worth my time. Monday morning at work, my mind kept drifting back to neighborhood issues. It was strange how much mental space Riverside Estates was taking up, but in a good way mostly. During my lunch break, I did some research on neighborhood watch programs, looking at best practices and potential pitfalls. That evening, I called Rachel back. "I'll help with the neighborhood watch, but I have some conditions. It needs to be focused purely on actual safety and crime prevention, not HOA enforcement. It should be voluntary with no pressure on people to participate. And it needs clear guidelines so it doesn't turn into vigilante nonsense." "I agree with all of that. Can you draft a proposal with those principles?" "Yeah, I can do that." Over the next week, I put together a comprehensive proposal for a Riverside Estates neighborhood watch program. I consulted with Officer Garcia from the Riverside Police Department, who provided guidance on effective practices. I surveyed neighbors to gauge interest and gather input, and I worked with Rachel and the board to make sure everything aligned with proper procedures. The proposal was presented at the April board meeting. It passed unanimously, and within a month, we had 20 households signed up to participate. The program was simple. People agreed to be generally observant of their surroundings and report anything genuinely suspicious to the police. No confrontations, no amateur detective work, just being good neighbors who looked out for each other. It worked beautifully. In May, a neighborhood watch participant noticed someone checking car door handles late at night and called the police. The police caught a suspect who'd been responsible for a string of vehicle break-ins across the area. In June, another participant noticed an elderly neighbor's newspaper piling up and wellness checked her, discovering she'd fallen and needed medical attention. These were the kinds of things a neighborhood should do for each other. Not enforcing arbitrary rules or measuring grass height, but genuinely caring about safety and well-being. By the time summer arrived, Riverside Estates felt like a completely different place than it had been during Donna's tenure. The July 4th block party drew nearly the entire neighborhood. Kids played in the street while parents chatted and grilled. Someone set up a volleyball net on the community center lawn. As darkness fell, people gathered to watch fireworks from the nearby high school field. I stood with Robert, Frank, and a few others, watching the colorful explosions light up the night sky. "This is what I remember from when I first moved here 8 years ago," Robert said. "Before everything became about enforcement and fines and conflict, this is what community should feel like." "We got it back," Frank said, "thanks to people willing to fight for it." "We all did our part," I said. "But yeah, it's good to have this back." As summer turned to fall, life continued its steady rhythm. The HOA board operated smoothly under Rachel's leadership. Neighborhood watch participants continued to look out for each other. People maintained their properties not because they feared fines, but because they took pride in their homes and wanted to contribute to a pleasant environment. In September, Rachel approached me again about running for the board. 2 positions would be open in the March election, including Tom Martinez's seat. "Tom's not running for re-election," Rachel explained. "He's taking a job that requires a lot of travel, so he doesn't feel he can commit the time. We need good people to fill that spot. You've already proven yourself as someone who cares about fair governance and community building." "Let me think about it," I said, which was becoming my standard response when Rachel asked me to take on more responsibility. But this time, I was actually seriously considering it. Being on the board would mean attending monthly meetings, dealing with occasional conflicts, reviewing budgets and maintenance contracts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was important. In October, I made my decision. I would run for the board. Not because I wanted power or authority, but because I wanted to help ensure that what happened under Donna's leadership never happened again. I wanted to be part of maintaining the positive changes we'd worked so hard to achieve. When I told Rachel, she was delighted. "You're going to be great at this, Warren. You've got exactly the right temperament and approach. The election in March was straightforward. Two candidates ran for the two open positions. Me and a woman named Lisa Chen, Robert's daughter, who had moved to Ohio to be closer to her father after his hip surgery. We both ran on platforms of transparent governance, reasonable enforcement, and community building. Both of us were elected with strong support. My first board meeting as an elected member was in April, exactly a year after the audit results had been presented. Sitting at the table where Donna had once sat, I felt the weight of responsibility but also a sense of purpose. The meeting was routine, reviewing the budget, discussing upcoming maintenance projects, approving applications for property modifications. Nothing dramatic, nothing controversial. Just 5 neighbors working together to manage the administrative needs of our community. After the meeting, Robert was waiting outside to congratulate me. How does it feel to be on the other side of the table? Strange, but good. I hope I can live up to the trust people placed in me. You will. Just remember what we learned from Donna's mistakes. Lead with humility. Listen more than you talk. Serve the community instead of ruling it. That's the plan. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey from that cold January morning when Donna had accused me of creating a propane smell to now, sitting on the very board she had once controlled. It had been a wild ride, full of conflict and stress, but ultimately rewarding. The propane smell that had started it all had come from Robert's faulty furnace, but it had exposed a much bigger problem. An HOA that had lost its way, that had become more about control than community. Fixing that problem had required courage, persistence, and people willing to work together for positive change. Now, as a board member myself, I had the opportunity to help ensure those positive changes lasted. To model the kind of governance that served people rather than oppressing them. To build on the foundation of trust and collaboration that had been re-established over the past year. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be disagreements and difficult decisions. But I was confident that, with good people working together, we could navigate whatever challenges came our way. I pulled into my driveway and looked at my house, the same house that had been falsely accused all those months ago. It looked exactly the same, but everything else had changed. I had changed, from a newcomer who just wanted to be left alone to someone actively engaged in making his community better. Sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes. That propane smell had been unpleasant, and the accusations had been unfair, but they'd set in motion a chain of events that ultimately made Riverside Estates a better place to live. And that was worth every moment of stress and conflict along the way. Inside, I poured a celebratory glass of wine and raised it in a silent toast. To fair governance, to good neighbors, to communities that work together, and to faulty furnaces that accidentally expose bigger problems and create opportunities for positive change. Here's to home, I thought. Not just a house, but a true home in a true community. The end.